I'm Peter Davis. I've been pen spinning since 2011, and most recently, I won the stand-up theme in the 2022 Pen Spinning Olympics. I've been challenged today to break down pen spinning into 21 levels of increasing complexity. Pen spinning is actually a lot like juggling. You basically use your fingers, your hands, sometimes your wrists and arms or even knees to toss, to spin, to throw the pen or pen-shaped object in any way that you'd like. As a disclaimer, this is my interpretation of the challenge. Level 1, charge. The charge uses conical rotation in one spot of the hand, but just spins conically in one spot. And conical rotation means that the pen is not actually spinning end over end in a full circle, it's just tracing out a conical motion on both sides of the hand. Level 2, pass. Passes are very simple tricks in pen spinning, and you might not even have noticed you doing them yourself just in daily life. They involve passing the pen from one finger slot to the next one, and they can go either over the finger or under the finger in either direction. The pass is slightly more complex than the charge because the pen is actually changing position in the hand. You have to clear the outside finger that you're passing from, and then duck the other finger under or over. That involves a couple more things that you have to get used to when you're really gaining fluency in them. Next up, wipers. Wipers are done near the tip of the pen, and that's because the pen has to pass through the finger slot with a half rotation of spin. Wipers to me are more complex than passes simply because they can go wrong in many more ways. If you're not near the tip of the pen, then the parts of your hand that you're trying to pass through might get in the way and stop your wiper. And also, when you're near the tip of the pen, almost all the weight is on the other side, so controlling that momentum and keeping the pen from slipping out of your hand can be really difficult to do on more complex wipers. The triangle pass consists of 3 different finger switches. You can hold the pen to start in all 3, and then you lift one from the barrel while it passes about a third of a rotation, and then you bring the finger back down on the other side of the pen while lifting the next finger. So each finger switch is a third of a rotation, and you're always gripping the pen between 2 fingers as it rotates. So every full triangle pass completed, that is every 3 finger switches, is half a rotation, 180 degrees. Each finger switch accounts for roughly 60 degrees of that, and every 2 triangle passes you complete is a full rotation, or 360 degrees. You're not fully gripping the pen at any point, so if you're off center in one direction or the other, it makes it really easy for the pen to fall out. Level 5, sonic. The basic sonic involves charge, which is conical rotation, and 2 different finger switches. So you do half a charge in one slot, and then you clear that lower finger down until the pen comes in contact with the next finger up. And then as that charge continues, that finger that you move down comes back into contact with the pen, completing a full 360 degree rotation. You can also make sonics inverse. You do a charge, and then you clear that finger up out of the way, and then it comes back down, and the middle comes into contact with it that way. And you can combine these modifiers in a lot of ways. You can keep the charge rotation the same, but switch the finger switches, which is what's known as moonwalk sonic, and you can add a lot of complexity in those ways. Level 6, thumb around. The thumb around is a trick you've likely seen in TV or movies or anime, and it involves the pen going around the thumb and then being caught again with the index finger. People tend to mess up thumb around when learning it is by starting too near to the center of the pen. So in around tricks, the barrel of the pen has to trace over the entire circumference of the finger or thumb that it's rotating around. So to learn a thumb around, you need to start with most of the weight on the pinky side of the hand, and then by the time you're done, you'll be on the opposite part of the barrel. For the rest of the levels, we're going to be incorporating pen modifications. Weight and length can have a big influence on the types of pen spinning tricks that you can do and how well you can do them and how difficult they are to do. These basically have characteristics that make it easier to learn harder tricks. They have balanced weight, a little more weight toward the tips, maybe a good grip. Different pen spinners prefer different mods. To me, the natural next step in complexity is the backfall. The backfall involves 4 different arounds that are linked together with passes. All 4 fingers are used, and a back is done on the index, then the middle, then the ring, then the pinky. And in between each completed back, the pen passes under the finger from one slot to the next. In the early days of pen spinning, the backfall was a really important, impressive trick that if you could do it smoothly, you were one of the best. These days, people can pick it up in their first half year of pen spinning for the most part, but to do it smoothly with a light pen and do it elegantly is still rather impressive and tough to figure out. Level 8, index bust. The index bust is basically a continuous around done on the index finger, which is just the same as a back, but with the opposite direction of rotation. In around tricks, the pen ends up in a different position than when it started. So to make them continuous, you have to get back to that original position. Sometimes it involves a bit of a slide. Most of the time, it involves a little bit of air time to move your hand to the position where the around began. Index busts in particular are probably one of the most common finishing tricks you'll ever see in combos. Having learned about around tricks, the natural next step of complexity to me is half around tricks, which brings us to the power pass. The power pass is a sequence of 4 half arounds, which can appear similar to passes because they take up 180 degrees of rotation and the pen moves from one slot to an adjacent slot. The main distinction between a pass and a half around or power pass is that the power pass is what we call fingerless, meaning that there aren't 2 points of contact with the pen. So you're not actually gripping the pen between 2 fingers, but it's sort of resting on one or another, and you can put forces in the pen in different ways. Power passes down on the back side of the hand involve 4 different tricks. The normal power pass involves the fingers curling from index to pinky and the pen moving clockwise. Then, power pass reverse involves those same fingers uncurling pinky to index and the pen going counterclockwise. The mirrored power pass involves all the fingers moving in the reverse order. And then mirrored power pass reverse involves the reverse of that one, which means that the fingers uncurl from index to pinky and the pen moves clockwise. You'll find that you don't actually have to flex your fingers really hard. You'll just learn how the pen feels on your fingers so that the angle is correct, so that you don't have to keep those fingers out of the way quite as much. Level 10, back 1.5. So as we went over with the rounds, when you begin an around, you're in one position of the pen, and when you end, you're in a completely different position. Another way to do an around after doing the same around is to add just a half rotation of spin on the back of the hand. You can learn back 1.5s on any implement, but it's always going to be easier to use a pen that's nearly perfectly balanced. The reason for that is that from one back 1.5 to the next, you're starting on the opposite sides of the pen. So if those have different weights, it's going to be really hard to get used to doing one after the other. Next up, cardioid. Cardioid tricks are hybrids between arounds and wipers, but they actually tend to be pretty complex and difficult to execute. Cardioids are another way of dealing with the problem of ending in a different position than you started when sequencing arounds one after the other. So the reason that I've put cardioids in this position is that the number of ways you can mess it up is pretty darn high, and you have to be super precise with your positioning on the pen, and the margin of error timing-wise is really slim. Up next, dual pass. In a dual pass, you might recognize the resemblance to a triangle pass. Every execution of it is a full 180 degrees, but there are only 2 fingers instead of 3, and this makes it a lot more complex and a lot more difficult to execute. You'll sort of learn how it feels to have the pen spinning on one fingertip while moving the other one, and you want to stay basically, again, right in the center of the pen because you have very little control of it, so the momentum could take it off of your fingers basically at any moment. Level 13, power tricks. Basic power tricks are sequences of tricks that are all fingerless, often involving a lot of air time. I start with an extended thumb around bust release times 2, meaning that the pen rotates for a full rotation and a half in the air. And then I catch it with the index. I do a half power pass to the pinky, then do that again, and then release with the pinky again in what's called a spread. And then I'll catch it on the thumb and do a thumb around fingerlessly, spin the pen for half a rotation on these 2 fingers that are curled, known as a spider spin, because of the sort of Spider-Man gesture it gives. Release again with the thumb around, do the same thing with a palm spin, and then release again, and then do what's called a haitua, which is where the pen goes around the thumb, rotates half a rotation on the back of the hand, and then is released off of the pinky. You'll see that I'm using a bunch of power tricks that all use the same exact direction of rotation. And this is the main way that people learn power tricks because since they're fingerless, they rely heavily on maintaining one direction of momentum so that when you're sequencing all these fingerless tricks together, it's really important to keep that momentum going. Level 14, inverse power pass. The inverse power passes are quite a bit harder than the ones that are done on the back of the hand because your fingers can only bend in one direction. So if you were to make it inverse perfectly, you'd want your fingers to bend backwards, but you can't do that. So instead of having the pen rotate on the curled finger every time, at each stage of the inverse power pass, the pen is only touching one finger at a time and is sort of balancing on the side. So in the inverse power passes, since the pen is never resting on a surface, you have to maintain that momentum very carefully and have each of your fingers curl or uncurl at the precise moment that they need to. Next up, finger cross. So far, through all of these levels, we've had the 4 main finger slots between the thumb and the index and middle, and so on. And the fingers proceed in this order as they do on your hand. But you can actually cross your fingers over one another so that the order of these finger slots changes quite a bit. The best way to incorporate finger crosses into your pen spinning is to make sure they're active, meaning that they're touching the pen while they're crossing over one another. So if you have the pen between the ring and pinky fingers, you have that pen within those fingers as they cross over one another, and you get a full 180-degree rotation. Level 16, 1 pen, 2 hands. So you don't have to spin pens in just one hand. A lot of people involve both hands, wrists, other parts of the body even, but it's very common for people to specialize in 1 pen, 2 hand spinning, where 1 pen is spun, but 2 hands can be involved either independently or interconnected. When you move into 2 hand spinning, some things will feel a lot easier than they did originally, and some things will feel pretty weird. It didn't come to me incredibly easily. It can be really unfamiliar at first, but you'll probably pick stuff up a bit quicker than you did initially because you sort of know how the tricks work. Level 17. Changing the plane of rotation. The first thing I'm doing is taking a normal power pass and executing it so that my palm is facing outward. What this does is similar to what makes inverse power passes so much more complex. When my fingers aren't curling in this direction, I don't have this knuckle where the pen can rest and spin, and I have to have the pen touch just 1 finger at a time. I also can't really see my hand very well and see exactly how close I am to the center of the pen, and it's actually a bit harder to flex your fingers fully when your forearm is pronated like this. The second thing I'm showing is an index bust, but my hand is just flipped 180 degrees upside down. And this simply makes the trick a lot harder because you're fighting against gravity a lot more. You don't have the back of your hand where the pen can sort of rest and rotate. When you're changing the plane of rotation for your tricks, you sort of have to retrain both your brain and your fingers to relearn exactly what the mechanic is and what your fingers are supposed to do. Whether that's fighting against gravity because there's a lot more air time and you have less of your hand to rely on, or whether it's just how different your hand can feel when it's facing different directions. Up next, charge removal. So a lot of what we've been dealing with so far is adding things, adding more mechanics, adding more tricks. Charge removal is sort of the opposite. You're removing certain things that feel natural in order to make the margin of error a lot tighter. Charge removal can be pretty subtle and difficult to notice, and that's why it's actually called Japanese motion sometimes, because Japanese spinners used it a lot in a variety of ways, and some people just didn't really notice or pick up on it all that much. So the way it often works is when the palm changes position when you're doing passes or sonics or rounds or anything, there's a natural charge or half charge that's added in to account for that changing of the palm position. But with tighter timing and different mechanics, you can actually take out that extra charge and snap your hand into position, and it looks really clean and precise. Level 19, Advanced Sonic Hybrids. A lot of pen spinners out there really focus on very thorny combinations of sonics that require a lot of flexibility, really tight timing, and might not be that elegant. I like to focus on ones that involve maintaining a conical rotation cleanly while moving the hands very precisely. So what I'm showing here starts with half of a normal sonic. You clear the middle down and you hold it with the ring and index. Then it's interrupted by a reverse power pass on the middle finger. So the index gets out of the way, you lift that middle finger fingerlessly, and the pen is about to enter the slot between the index and the middle finger. Then the trick is interrupted again, and while the pen is rotating counterclockwise on the middle finger, the hand can rotate a little bit out of the way, you flick that middle finger down, and with no rotations added, recatch the pen in that charge rotation between the middle and ring fingers. This sort of thing is really useful because often you have to get from one finger slot to another one. You can add in these degrees of complexity to add tiny tricks in while moving simply from one finger slot to another one. Level 20, threading. Threading is a concept that was recently developed by a Malaysian pen spinner who has extremely flexible fingers and has been very, very instrumental in developing finger cross tricks. Threading involves a non-adjacent finger cross, meaning that the fingers that are crossed aren't right next to each other. There are a number of ways to fail. One of the ways is in threading, your fingers can just get stuck on the way through and not make it all the way through. If you cross your fingers too much or too little, the actual finger cross can come undone, or you won't leave enough space for a finger to go through. And in trying to execute these cleanly, it's really tough to make the rotation smooth. Having hitches in your rotation while you execute any finger cross trick is going to be the case until you get really confident with them. Level 21, Advanced Combos. These are the sorts of things that you'll see in any pen spinning collaboration video at a high level. I try to add a good variety of visual flavor, changes in direction, changes in planes of rotation, a lot of different mechanics, maybe varying the pace, some slow sections, some fast sections, and that lends itself really well to showing a wide variety of the types of tricks that we've been going over. In this combo, I start out with some fingerless around reverses or backs, and then I change the plane of rotation to do a mirrored power pass reverse with my palm facing forward. Then I'll do some simple wipers and passes to set up the next section, which is related to the back 1.5s that we saw earlier, with the direction of rotation changed and the palm facing up instead. To finish the combo off, I do some quick passes and fingerless passes to get the pen between my middle and ring fingers, and then do a simple twisted sonic that then hybridizes into a more advanced sonic trick that sets up a rotated index bust release finish. When you're first starting, it is easy to get discouraged because things can come at different paces for everybody, but it's important to realize that there's so much out there that people can learn and contribute to. In 2022, the World Cup champion team featured a pen spinner who had been pen spinning for under 2 years. The great thing about pen spinning is that you can really do it anywhere, anytime. You can learn at your own pace using whatever you want. So I hope this encourages you to pick up a pen, a pencil, even a stick, and start learning these tricks. Thanks for watching.